Hi friends, thanks for joining me here today. Today let's talk about how to create training plans that will really advance market research and insight skills without creating so much work that you never finish the plan. Now look, in an ideal world, I do like to do a thorough assessment before creating a training plan for any individual or team, but realistically, that's not always going to be feasible. And especially if you're creating your own training plans, it can be overwhelming to do a needs assessment and a gap analysis. Those things take real time. It doesn't have to always be that complicated. So if you're feeling like you're really behind, you haven't created a training plan, you know you need one, here's a couple of ways that we can do this without it being too overwhelming. But first, before we talk about the training itself and how we're going to create the training plan, let's have an honest conversation about training. So, my question for you is, have you ever signed up for training and then been a no-show? Or maybe you've had people on your team for whom you signed them up for training and at the last minute they had to bow out. One of the challenges we have is that many of us who work in market research and insights work on projects. That's the nature of a lot of our work. So there's always a deadline. There's always something urgent. So making time for training, let alone planning training, is really, really challenging. We have to simplify the process of not just planning the training, but actually participating in the training, because we've all had that experience. We had the good intent, but not necessarily the follow through to actually participate in training. So one of the challenges that comes up is that when it comes to training, it's always easy to delay. Oh, I'll put this off till next week or next month or next year, right? There's nothing usually super urgent about training. It's like the person who needs to take a time management class but never has time to take the time management class. Well, you may be the same with market research skills. You know you want to take the training, you know it would help you, but taking the time is really, really challenging. So it can be easy to put it off. It can also feel overwhelming. You have projects, you have a workload, and on top of this, now you're going to be adding on schoolwork, basically. You're going to have to study, you're going to have to practice, you may have homework assignments or big readings, and it can feel overwhelming. And finally, another deterrent that I often run into is, frankly, sometimes people have had poor experiences in the past with training. So let's imagine for a minute that you are a team leader, you lead an insights team, and several people on your team have had really bad previous training experiences. Well, even though you want them to participate in training, and even though they say they want training, getting them to actually do it can be really challenging if they've had bad previous experiences. After all, how are they supposed to put off that deadline or work extra hard in order to keep a deadline on a work project and take on all this extra work when in the back of their head they're thinking, the last time I took a training course, it was a little too theoretical. It was interesting, but it didn't really impact my work. Or maybe they just didn't like the instructor or the content. So all of those things can lead to a lack of momentum when it comes to training. So what we have to do is really just try to keep it simple. Let's prioritize the content. So even if you're not going to do a formal training plan, simply taking a few minutes to prioritize the content that you or your team needs in terms of skills will go a long way. This doesn't have to be an onerous process. Again, a needs assessment and a gap analysis would be lovely, but may not be practical, right? So I'd rather you do some planning than no planning at all. The other thing is you have to plan a realistic timeline. That is, how quickly are people going to participate in training, and how often will they participate in training? Be realistic. You don't want to expect that people are going to take 20 hours of training in a month, right? If they've got a lot of big deadlines and projects going on, that may simply be unrealistic. On the other hand, we don't want to encourage what we call drive-by training. What happens with training is that if you have some skills or specific capabilities that you're looking to develop in yourself or in others, there's a temptation sometimes to just sort of go, do training that is just super fast, super immersive. But actually, there's a lot of research on adult learning that shows that people actually learn better. That is, they're more likely to retain and use what they've learned if it's spaced out a little bit over time. And there's a lot of research on this topic. There's a concept called spacing, for example, when it comes to learning, where we want to make sure we give people a chance to be exposed to new knowledge, have a little time, and then get exposed to it and get to practice with it again. So we don't want to just have all the training that they're going to need for the year in 1 week, because they simply will not retain it and use it. So we want to make sure that what training we do choose is going to be able to get spaced out a bit so that it's a more realistic, frankly, plan for success for your learners. Now, as we think about prioritizing content, being realistic, not overcommitting to people, a good thing is to just come up with your top priorities in terms of learning goals. So what I want to do now is teach you how to craft what I would call a learning goal. Sometimes we call these learning objectives. So for example, let's imagine that you are putting together a training plan to onboard new researchers. Maybe your team is growing, you know you're going to have some new people joining, and you want to have a plan so that everybody who joins that team will have a basic foundation in common. All right, well, what are my goals in that case? Well, here's 3 that I would recommend. You probably want to make sure that those folks, upon completion of the training, can discuss various methodologies with confidence, that they know the lingo, that they know the difference between primary and secondary and quantitative and qualitative, and that they understand some of the jargon that we use when we're, frankly, planning the methodologies for executing projects. So sometimes that's a good goal for bringing in new researchers, especially if you have folks who are coming in at a junior level. You might also want to make sure that at the end of the training that they can specify appropriate project parameters. Do they understand sample size? Will they be able to define the parameters for data collection? Those are all things that are really important, very fundamental. How about you wanting new researchers to be able to understand and use processes that help ensure client satisfaction? Whether you're serving internal clients or external clients, the market research and insights professional ultimately is delivering research to somebody else, and we want to make sure that person is satisfied. So you might want part of your onboarding program to include some training on how to make sure clients are satisfied. Now, let's just say hypothetically you like these 3 learning goals, that you feel like, gosh, if all of my new team members could demonstrate these things at the end of training, I would be happy. Great. Those are 3 concise, reasonable goals. It's not an overwhelming amount of training to give somebody. And in fact, I'll show you what courses they would need if it was through Research Rockstar. Now, obviously, I am biased here because myself and 11 other wonderful instructors do teach here at Research Rockstar. But you can find market research courses in a few different places. I'm just going to use mine as an example because, well, frankly, they're mine. So let's take a look. So if those were your learning goals for onboarding a new team, you probably want a little market research 101, right? Get them into the basics. You might also want to give them a little bit of training specifically to those methodologies you use most often. Let's imagine that that's focus groups and surveys. Fantastic. Let's get them a little training on focus group project management, a little training on questionnaire design. Oh, and don't forget those client management skills. So that's 4 courses. It's not an overwhelming amount of training, and it can be spaced out over, say, a 5 or 6 month period very easily so that they're not getting the drive-by training and they aren't all, and neither are they getting overwhelmed by having too much work to do on their training experience while they're also trying to keep up with client work and deadlines. Let's take a look at a second example. Let's imagine that your training goal is to make sure that your team is advancing its use of research. That is, you want to make sure that your team isn't over-relying on just 1 or 2 research methodologies. You want your team to be really conversant and confident when talking about a wide variety of data sources and research methodologies. Okay, so in that case, we need a training plan that will create a situation where at the end of the training, that your students will be able to advise on when to use or not use a wide variety of data sources and methodologies. All right, that seems very feasible and desirable for many teams. And you also, in that case, want to make sure that they have the ability to work collaboratively with clients, because when you're getting into a broader range of methodologies, then you're going to need your team to have some skills where they can do a better job of collaborating with clients and really understanding their needs so that they can translate the client's business needs or research application needs to the right combination of data sources and methodologies. And that tends to be a more collaborative process. It's not just taking an order. It's really working with somebody to make sure that you understand their needs so you can make a recommendation. So if in a hypothetical situation, those were your learning goals, well, how many courses would you have to have the team take? Is that a lot of courses or a little? At Research Rockstar, this is what we would do. But again, depending on who your training partners are or what courses you're going to have them take, obviously, your mileage will vary. In our case, I would have them do online qualitative research methods, because that's going to get them a wide variety of online qualitative instead of relying, heavily on, say, traditional focus groups and in-depth interviews. I might also want them to know a little bit more about statistics, especially multivariate analysis. If I have a team that's very comfortable with basic statistics and just descriptives and crosstabs, that's fine. But maybe I want to amp it up, and I want them to have some understanding of when to use multivariate analyses in order to meet the client's needs. So in this case, I might say, I want them to know about conjoint and discrete choice in max diff. That's going to be, a good introduction to multivariate analysis. Now, I will say in our course on conjoint, discrete choice, and max diff, for us, that's a class that's geared towards project managers. They're not going to get hands-on in SPSS or Sawtooth in that class, although they will see some examples of output. But it gives them the knowledge so that they're comfortable knowing when to recommend those things, and frankly, what some of the gotchas are as well, so they can set appropriate expectations with clients. And then finally, for this particular training plan, I would also recommend our course on data fluency. And again, this is about making sure that the research and insights professional is acquainted with a wide variety of data sources and methods, especially if they're serving clients who work in marketing. Marketing clients these days have access to a wide variety of data sources. You've probably heard your marketing clients refer to first, second, and third-party data. In data fluency, we tackle those topics and some more so that the research and insights professional is as conversant as the marketing client is in a wide variety of data sources and methodologies, and can, again, be collaborative in helping figure out what the right plan is, which combination of things is going to best meet the client's needs. So those were just a couple of examples. If you do want more examples, I have a few more, and I posted them on the Research Rockstar blog, so you can check them out there at researchrockstar.com/blog. And I included there a sequence for developing qualitative research skills, a sequence for developing survey research skills, and a sequence for developing what I call consultative skills. It's been sort of a hot topic lately where I talk to a lot of team leaders that are trying to get their team to be more consultative and to be able to be a bit more proactive about recommending specific research plans. And this requires a level of client management, a certain scope of knowledge, but it also requires having some processes that you can use so that you can be consultative. And for some people in research and insights, that may be a new skill set. That may not be something that that may not be a muscle they have previously exercised. So a little training can go a long way. But of course, your needs may be entirely something else. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't have time to do the needs assessment and the gap analysis, just try to write down those 3 or 4 learning objectives. At the end of the training, what are the 3 or 4 things you want people to be able to do? Is it about being confident? Is it about being able to do a specific task or manage a specific type of project or client? If you can specify just a few things, it will really help you to pick courses that will meet your students' needs with excellence. I hope this conversation has been helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, do let me know. This conversation is available both on YouTube and in an audio-only version on iTunes. And I do have to ask you a favor. I need folks to not only subscribe on either YouTube or iTunes, but also to please like and review. I need to get more reviews so that our conversations are more easily found in the YouTube and iTunes search engines. You have to reach a certain minimum number of likes and reviews for those search engines to treat you nice. So please do like, please do subscribe, and if you have any questions, please do contact me. Thanks, and have a great day.